if you're anything like me, you've watched too much House MD or Sherlock and enjoyed it immensely. We like those witty characters, those geniuses who can spot little things and have these amazing insights about what's going on. However, those types of shows actually skew our thinking too much because we think that's what being an amazing or brilliant person in a company means. But that's not it. In fact, what I want to talk about today is the fact that you can be a tenfold more effective in your role, in your company, in your personal business, if you just know how to leverage common sense and learn how to weaponize it correctly. And that's what we're going to be doing today, because having the ability to spot obviosities and not just the amazing, incredible chances of spotting someone has lupus. If you didn't watch House, never mind. If you have that ability to just spot the basics and talk about them and not be afraid of saying that and being curious, you're going to see your common sense rise to a level that's genuinely life-changing. And this is what you'll be learning in a few minutes right now. First of all, what does it even mean? I want to paint a picture. Common sense is not common enough, and for you to be utilizing it doesn't mean that you're going to be Captain Obvious. It does mean that you're able to ask precisely the right questions. Sometimes they're going to be stupid, but more often than not, you're going to ask the right questions that will help people realize that maybe something is lacking, maybe they missed something, maybe there's an idea there, or perhaps help you uncover new ways of doing things, help you get to a result faster, realize that what you're doing doesn't even matter. Whatever it is, common sense is about being able to talk about things and not always having to assume this position of we know everything and feeling like if something doesn't make sense for you, you're the only one in the room that doesn't get it, so you just better keep silent. That's not what we're going to do today, okay? Common sense is about talking, conversing with others in a way that gives you the freedom to ask what's on your mind, so you understand 100% of what you need to understand, and you make sure that the others you're talking to understand what they're doing. Okay? Now, how do you leverage your common sense within 30 days? The first step is to think. You can't have common sense if you don't have any sense. And it might sound weird, but for me, having worked with leaders worldwide, I can genuinely say we do not think enough. People nowadays are just constantly doing and not thinking. They're in their routines. They're doing what they are to be doing. Maybe you're thinking about a tough problem at work, but are you thinking about what you want to achieve, about how things look, about the right way of doing things? I have, for over a decade now, written regularly. So I write, be it blog posts, articles, books, but also a lot of notebooks. These are the small ones. I have, book-like ones, and I have stacks of them in my house. I write constantly, and that's not even counting all the writing I do, journaling on my iPad, and typing out stuff. I have found that having the ability to sit down and write what I'm thinking, what has surprised me recently, what I'm predicting is going to happen in this project, to that company I just saw, to that Apple announcement and what's going to end up happening with that within a year, just thinking about things. And, it's not as if I'm a monk sitting in my room and just writing about everything I'm experiencing all the time, but even having 15 minutes a day of writing what you're thinking, writing your thought processes, is producing so much value. And also, it puts me in a position where I'm better at observing things. When I'm in meetings, when I'm talking to people, I'm more present, I'm more mindful, and I can notice what's going on around us. I might notice how they're speaking about something, how they're skipping over a step, and having these observations is the basis of a healthy common sense, because that's how you collect these triggers that you then turn into your questions. But before we get into asking the questions, the common sense questions, it's not enough to just think. You also need to learn. You might think that you learn enough in your day-to-day job. That might be right, might not be. Personally, I see that too many of us are breathing our own exhaust. We're not getting enough external learning. Are you reading? And I'm not talking about Twitter. I'm talking about actual things that make you think. It might be fiction, it might not be. But still, you need to be thinking about things. Are you learning? Are you watching YouTube videos that are not just making you laugh, but also getting you to think differently? Are you subscribed to newsletters that open your mind? Are you listening to podcasts? Whatever medium is the right one for you. You need to be constantly getting inspiration from outside, seeing how others are doing things, getting some experience from experts, and seeing what developments are happening around us. Because otherwise, you're not going to be learning as fast as the world now allows us. It used to be that the sole things you had within 2 miles of your house were the only things you could learn from. That's no longer the case. I'm speaking to you from my house. Who knows where you are? However, if you're learning, you all of a sudden can accelerate the amount of thinking you're doing, because you have all of these inputs. They're not just the inputs of what you're seeing at work, but also the inputs from all of the learning. And combining those together, we can now start moving towards utilizing our common sense. And I'm using my notes, by the way, if you see me looking down. So, how do you start incorporating common sense at work, in your business, anywhere else in your life? Well, we start with the ABCs. Always be curious. I think that this is something that is it's just such a shame that we seem to lose this as we age. I see it with my kids. It's amazing, their curiosity. They observe things instantly. We go to Italy, and all of a sudden they notice the smallest changes in the pavements, and how this airplane is different from the previous one, and how people even move in the street when you're in front of them. They notice any little thing, the thing that person was wearing. They're constantly curious. And this is something that we need to be doing more of. Instead of being in routine, try and always be mindful when you're working with people. When you're hearing about something, don't just smile and wave. Try and understand and see if there's anything interesting that you can latch onto, that you can learn more from. So ask a question about that. Be curious. And how do you ask questions? Common sense, I find, is something that we don't see enough, because all of us, especially I can speak from experience. I have what I call a common sense filter. I have this fear. Now I'm much better at it, but I used to have this fear that stopped me from asking questions that I felt were common sense. I felt like if I'm in a meeting or if I'm working with a client, I cannot ask something if it's not a very clever thing to say, if it's not a Sherlock sort of sentence. But that doesn't need to be the case. We can turn off that common sense filter and instead allow ourselves to ask out loud the stupid question. And my trick for asking the stupid question that I think might be obvious is to ask it as soon as possible. The faster you do it, the easier it is, and the longer you wait, it becomes harder to ask something that you feel is stupid, that you realized 5 minutes ago. If the second someone tells me something, I read it and say, really? Why is that? Or what do you mean by that? Instead of waiting 10 minutes into the conversation and letting the discussion go on, assuming what they said is right, and only then circling back. So I ask that, and sometimes it just, people, give me a very straightforward answer. They actually thought about what I just asked. It's fine. Okay, we move on. But because I asked immediately, people understand that I was just trying to understand what they're saying. It doesn't register as being too stupid. And at least it seems to me that if you do this enough, people are just used to and actually start expecting you to be so involved in the discussion that you find all those interesting little areas that you can dig more deeper into. So ABC, always be curious and ask the stupid questions as fast as possible when it comes to your mind. And if you make that a routine, I used to have a post-it to remind me. Now I do it more often without that. But I always try to remind myself when I went into big meetings, when I went to a conversation with a prospect, I always had a mental note of trying to ask something that surprised me, something that I think is stupid. So if they approached me, for example, I would say, "Why now? What happened?" And it might register at first as something stupid to ask. Someone inquires about your services. Why are you asking why now? But no, I am curious about why now, because this is part of my common sense understanding. What has changed? Maybe now is not the right time. Or maybe this is now too late. Whatever. And if you have these sets of go-to questions you can use, you'll see how easy it becomes to ask the stupid questions. So for me, it's why now when someone asks me about something? Or what has changed? If I hear about a problem or hear about a solution, if I see someone doing something, they talk about a new issue they need to solve, a new project, I might ask, what is done? How would you know that you actually have achieved it? And why does that matter? Might sound stupid, but you'd be surprised how many really, really experienced and successful leaders go into huge projects without knowing what done would look like, or why they're even doing this. How would the world be better if we achieved this? So ask those stupid questions, ask them freely, ask them fast, and you're going to start seeing your common sense muscle grow, because you're actually, as with anything you work on, if you ask more and more of these common sense questions, it becomes second nature, and you can start doing this more freely. And if you make a mental note of asking one such question in every meeting you have, you'll see very fast improvement within a month, I guarantee that. Now, next, to ensure that your common sense is growing, that you're utilizing it correctly, I want you to make sure to stop avoiding directness. Sometimes people think this might be rude, this might seem like you're arrogant, you're attacking someone, but if you do it with the right intention, which is not to poke someone, to annoy someone, to be cynical, but if you're being direct because you want to ensure things are being done correctly, you can uncover so many things. So for example, my directness, when about a year into COVID, I talked to a founder of a startup that was in the space of commercial real estate. And I remember talking to that co-founder, and I asked him about how things were going, and he's like, yeah, of course, business crashed because commercial real estate is not what it used to be before the pandemic, before lockdown. And I very naturally asked, and how has that changed your strategy, given the changes that we're seeing globally? He just stared at me blankly and said, nothing, why should it matter? And the old me, the one who didn't wield common sense, would just say, okay, assuming whatever reason he has makes sense, or being afraid of being too direct, and moving on. But I poked, and I asked, what do you mean? How can you expect to just keep on doing the same things as if this didn't happen, as if your market is not going to be changed entirely for the next few years? And only then did something click, that they realized that they need to redo the strategy and think about that, which was useful for them and also a learning experience for me. So you need to be doing that. When I see, for example, a CEO comes up to me asking for help hiring a new VP or hiring a new CTO, I might ask, why? Why do you need that person? How are they supposed to help you? How would you know that you have the right person? And these questions are sometimes seen as too direct, because people are like, if I come to you and I ask you to help me do something and you're asking me why I'm doing it, some people see it as condescending. But if you do it with the right intention, And maybe sometimes I need to explain that and give a disclaimer that I'm not trying to be overly annoying. I'm just trying to understand the objectives, the real objectives behind something, so I can help them achieve the right thing. Because, when my kids come to me and say, hey, where's the hammer? I can tell them where's the hammer, but probably a better thing to do would be to ask, what do you need the hammer for? Because, sometimes they just need scissors to cut something, and they think that hammering it will be helpful. Asking in order to understand is not offensive. So even if you're asking a direct question, that doesn't mean you're doing something that's inappropriate, as long as you're doing with the right intention. And lastly, I want you to think about how common sense is around you. Because you can be a bright spot in your organization, in your company, in your life, and start spreading common sense and asking these questions. But sometimes, in most teams that are not tiny, there are already people who are good at this. There are people who naturally do this, people who have worked on this in the past, and you can spot that those are the people who sometimes know what questions to ask, or are not afraid to say something that everyone else in the room has avoided. And if you know some of these people, I want you to band together. When you notice them doing something, later come and tell them that you appreciate them. Or if you realize that you had a question that you didn't ask them about this. If I'm in a conference room with these people, and there's a question that I feel is stupid, I might ask them what they think about it. I might see if we can ask a question together as a few people who didn't understand it, because that makes things easier. It makes our common sense more common, and it makes it easier for you to exercise this. And if you do this, it sounds trivial, it sounds common sense, but I promise you, having worked with so many people, this is sometimes something that is life-changing. And just working on this for a bit can make your work so much effective. So I'm hoping you got something out of this. I'm hoping you're going to see your common sense improve. And I'm going to leave you with two things. One is, remember, ABC, always be curious. It's good for common sense, and it's good, I think, to just have a better life. And two, let me know what you thought about this. If you like this, like this. If you have any comment, let me know. And make sure to subscribe if you want to keep getting more of this. Thank you.